The scent of beeswax and tallow filled Katherine Sawyer's lungs as she squinted at the wick in her trembling hands. But no matter how hard she focused, the thin white thread kept blurring into two, then three, then disappearing entirely into the hazy fog that had become her world. She was 24 years old, and her eyes were betraying her, stealing away the only livelihood she had known since arriving in Fargo, Dakota Territory 5 years ago, with nothing but a carpet bag and her grandmother's candle-making recipes. The year was 1878, and winter was approaching fast across the northern plains, which meant her busiest season was about to begin. Except this year, she could barely see the molds in front of her face. Katherine set down the wick and pressed her palms against the scarred wooden workbench, feeling the familiar grooves and divots that mapped out her small shop like a language only her fingertips could read. The doctors in town, both of them, had examined her eyes months ago and delivered the same grim prognosis with different words. Her sight was fading, some degenerative condition they could not name or treat, and within a year, maybe two, she would be completely blind. They had been sympathetic but ultimately useless, and Katherine had walked out of each appointment feeling more alone than she had since the fever took her parents when she was 19. The bell above her shop door chimed, and Katherine turned toward the sound, making out only a tall, blurred figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon light streaming in from Front Street. She could see movement and shape but no details, no features, nothing that would tell her if this person was friend or stranger. "We are open," Katherine said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that always lurked beneath her words these days. "What can I help you find?" "I am looking for candles, madam," came a deep voice, rough around the edges but not unkind. "The kind that burn long and steady. I have got a claim about 15 miles north of here, and the nights are getting darker earlier now." Katherine nodded and moved carefully along the workbench, her hand trailing along the edge until she reached the shelf where she kept her finished tapers and pillars. She had organized everything by touch and memory, but lately even her system was failing her as she knocked things over or grabbed the wrong items. Her fingers found a bundle of tallow candles, the practical kind that most homesteaders preferred because they were affordable and reliable. "These will burn for about 4 hours each," Katherine said, holding out the bundle in what she hoped was the customer's general direction. "They are not fancy, but they will not let you down." The man moved closer, and Katherine caught a scent of leather, horse, and something else, maybe sage or prairie grass. He took the candles from her hand, and his fingers brushed against hers for just a moment, calloused and warm. "These will do fine," he said. "How much do I owe you?" "2 bits for the bundle," Katherine replied, pulling her hand back and folding her arms across her chest, suddenly self-conscious about the wax stains on her apron, and the fact that she probably had soot smudged on her face from the morning's work. She heard the jingle of coins and then felt them being pressed into her palm. The man's hand lingered again, just a second longer than necessary, and Katherine wondered if he had noticed her squinting, her unfocused gaze, the way she had not quite looked at him during their entire transaction. "Thank you kindly," the man said. "I am Benedict Turner, by the way. Most folks call me Ben. I will probably be back before winter really sets in. Your shop came highly recommended." "Katherine Sawyer," she replied automatically. "And thank you, I try to keep quality goods." She listened to his footsteps retreat toward the door, heard the bell chime again, and then he was gone, leaving her alone with the familiar smells and the unfamiliar flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her failing eyesight and everything to do with the warmth in that stranger's voice. Katherine returned to her workbench and picked up the wick again, holding it so close to her face that it nearly touched her nose. She could just barely make out the thin thread now, and she carefully positioned it in the center of a tin mold, securing it with a small dab of wax at the bottom. This was her life now, every task taking 3 times as long as it used to, every movement fraught with the possibility of error or injury. She had already burned herself twice this week, not seeing the hot wax until it was dripping onto her skin. The afternoon crawled by, and Katherine managed to produce a dozen passable candles before her eyes simply gave up, the strain of focusing causing a sharp headache to bloom behind her temples. She cleaned her workspace by touch, banking the fire in her small furnace and covering the molds with a cloth to keep the dust off. Her shop was attached to her living quarters, just a small room with a bed, a stove, and a table, but it was hers, paid for with her own work and determination. She had just settled into her rocking chair with a cup of weak tea when someone knocked on her door. Katherine frowned, setting down the cup and making her way carefully across the room, one hand on the wall for guidance. She opened the door and saw another blur, this one shorter and wider than Ben Turner had been. "Katherine, it is Margaret from the Mercantile," came a woman's brisk voice. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all," Katherine said, stepping aside. "Please come in." Margaret Walsh had been kind to Katherine since her arrival in Fargo, offering advice about suppliers and customers, and occasionally sharing a meal. She was a widow in her 50s, practical and no-nonsense, and Katherine had always appreciated her straightforward manner. "I will not stay long," Margaret said, and Katherine heard her moving toward the table. "I wanted to talk to you about something, and I figured it was better done in private." Katherine's stomach tightened with anxiety. "What is it?" "People are talking, Katherine," Margaret said gently. "About your eyes. About mistakes you have made with orders. Mrs. Henderson said the candles you sold her last week were 2 different sizes, and Mr. Peterson said you gave him beeswax when he paid for tallow." Heat flooded Katherine's face, embarrassment and anger mixing in equal measure. "I know I have made some errors lately," she admitted. "I am working on a better system to keep track of things. Katherine, everyone in this town respects you and the business you have built," Margaret continued, "but they are also starting to worry. What happens when you cannot see at all? What happens when you hurt yourself or burn down the building?" "I will figure it out," Katherine said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I have to figure it out. This shop is all I have." Margaret was quiet for a moment, and Katherine wished desperately that she could see the other woman's face, read her expression, understand what she was really trying to say. "I am not telling you this to be cruel," Margaret finally said. "I am telling you because I care about you. You need help, Katherine. You need someone who can assist you in the shop, or you need to consider selling the business while it still has value." "Sell," the word came out like a gasp. "This is my life, Margaret. I cannot just sell it." "I know," Margaret said softly. "But pride will not keep you fed or safe. Just think about it, please. And if you need anything at all, you come find me." After Margaret left, Katherine sat in the darkness of her room and let the tears come. She cried for her eyes, for her independence, for the future she had imagined that was slipping away like sand through her fingers. She cried until her head ached worse than before, and her throat was raw. And then she wiped her face and sat in silence, listening to the sounds of Fargo settling in for the night. She must have dozed off in the chair because the next thing she knew, someone was pounding on her door and shouting about a fire. Katherine jerked awake, her heart hammering, and stumbled toward the door. When she opened it, the smell of smoke hit her immediately, acrid and thick. "It is the saloon," a man's voice yelled. "2 buildings down. We need every bucket we can get." Katherine grabbed her shawl and followed the commotion outside, where it seemed like half the town had gathered. She could see the orange glow of flames even through her compromised vision, could feel the heat radiating down the street. People were running in every direction, forming bucket chains from the wells, shouting instructions and warnings. "Miss Sawyer, stay back," someone called out, and Katherine felt a hand on her arm, guiding her away from the chaos. "I can help," she protested. "I can carry water." "You will get hurt," the voice said, and Katherine recognized it as belonging to Thomas Reed, who ran the telegraph office. "Please, just stay over here where it is safe." She stood there feeling useless and frustrated, listening to the roar of the fire and the shouts of the men fighting it. The smoke stung her eyes and made them water, which only made her vision worse, and she had to resist the urge to run back to her shop and lock herself inside. It took hours to get the fire under control, and by the time the sun started to rise, the saloon was a charred skeleton, and everyone was exhausted and covered in soot. Katherine had stayed on the periphery the entire time, and now she made her way slowly back to her shop, using the storefronts as guides. She was almost to her door when she collided with someone, hard enough to make her stumble backward. "Careful there," a man said, catching her elbow to steady her. "Are you all right?" Katherine looked up and saw a familiar blur, tall and broad-shouldered. "Mr. Turner?" she asked hesitantly. "Ben, please," he said, and she could hear the surprise in his voice. "Were you at the fire?" "Just watching," Katherine admitted. "I am afraid I was not much help." "Nobody expects a lady to fight fires," Ben said, but there was no condescension in his tone, just simple fact. "Can I walk you somewhere? Make sure you get home safe." "I am home," Katherine said, gesturing vaguely behind her. "My shop is right here." "Then let me at least walk you to your door," Ben offered. Katherine wanted to refuse, wanted to prove that she could manage perfectly well on her own, but her pride had already taken enough beatings for one day. "All right," she said. "Thank you." Ben kept his hand on her elbow as they walked the few steps to her door, a gentle guidance that somehow did not feel patronizing. When they reached the entrance, Katherine turned to thank him properly and found herself looking up at his blurred face, wishing she could see his features clearly. "I heard what people were saying during the fire," Ben said quietly. "About your eyes, about you having trouble seeing." Katherine stiffened. "I managed just fine," she said coldly. "I was not suggesting otherwise," Ben replied. "I was just thinking that if you ever needed help with anything, heavy lifting or reaching high shelves or whatever it might be, I would be happy to lend a hand. I am in town most Saturdays for supplies anyway." "Why would you do that?" Katherine asked suspiciously. "You do not even know me." "Because people should help each other when they can," Ben said simply. "And because I think you make damn fine candles, and it would be a shame if you had to stop making them." Something in Katherine's chest loosened at his words, at the straightforward kindness with no pity attached. "That is generous of you," she said. "I will keep it in mind." "You do that," Ben said. "I will see you around, Miss Sawyer." She listened to him walk away, his boots striking the wooden sidewalk in an even rhythm, and then she let herself into her shop and leaned against the door, her mind spinning with thoughts she could not quite catch and pin down. The next few weeks passed in a blur, both literal and figurative. Katherine continued working despite her worsening vision, developing new systems to help her navigate the shop. She tied string around different areas of her workbench to mark where specific tools should be kept. She organized her candles by texture and size, running her hands over them to identify which was which. She even started asking customers to place their money directly into her cash box, because she could no longer distinguish between different coins reliably. Some customers were patient with her, understanding and even helpful. Others grew frustrated with the extra time everything took and started going to the general store for their candles instead, even though the quality was not as good. Katherine felt each lost customer like a physical blow, knowing her business was slowly dying but not knowing how to save it. Ben Turner came back to the shop 3 weeks after the fire, just as he had promised. Katherine was struggling to pour melted wax into a row of molds, trying to judge the right amount by feel since she could not see the fill lines anymore. She was concentrating so hard that she did not hear the door open, did not know anyone was there until Ben spoke. "That looks like tricky work," he said. Katherine jumped and her hand jerked, sending hot wax splashing across the workbench. "Damn it," she muttered, setting down the pot and reaching for a rag. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you," Ben said, moving closer. "Here, let me help clean that up." "I can do it," Katherine said, but Ben was already wiping up the spilled wax with a spare cloth, his movements efficient and careful. "I know you can," he said, "but that does not mean you have to." Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this man, this relative stranger who kept showing up and being kind to her for no reason she could understand. "What do you need today?" she asked, her voice rough. "Actually, I was thinking maybe you needed something," Ben said. "If you are not too proud to accept the offer." "What kind of offer?" Katherine asked warily. "Let me help you in the shop," Ben said. "Not all the time, just on Saturdays when I am in town anyway. I could do the heavy work, the pouring and lifting and such, and you could focus on the skilled parts that only you know how to do. We could be partners in a way." "I cannot pay you," Katherine said immediately. "The business is barely keeping me afloat as it is." "I am not asking for pay," Ben said. "I am asking to be useful. Out at my claim, it is just me and the silence and the work day after day. It gets lonely. Spending a few hours in town each week, doing something productive and having someone to talk to, that would be payment enough." Katherine crossed her arms, every instinct telling her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to not become a charity case. But another part of her, the practical part that sounded like Margaret's voice, pointed out that she was drowning, and this man was offering her a lifeline. "Why do you really want to do this?" she asked. Ben was quiet for a long moment. "Because I know what it is like to lose something important," he finally said. "I had a ranch down in Texas, a place my father and I built together. When he died, I could not keep it going alone and I had to sell. It about killed me, giving up on that dream. So when I see someone fighting to hold on to theirs, I guess I want to help however I can." The raw honesty in his voice disarmed her completely. "All right," Katherine heard herself say. "Saturdays, we can try it and see how it works." "Good," Ben said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "How about we start right now? What needs doing?" They fell into a rhythm that surprised Katherine with its ease. Ben took instruction well, listening carefully when she explained how to test the temperature of the wax or how to secure a wick properly. He did not talk down to her or try to take over, just did what she asked and filled the gaps where her failing sight created problems. By the end of the afternoon, they had produced more candles than Katherine had managed on her own in the past week. "Thank you," Katherine said as Ben prepared to leave. "Truly, thank you. This made a real difference." "Then I will be back next Saturday," Ben said. "Same time if that works for you." "It works," Katherine agreed. After he left, Katherine sat down at her small table and realized she was smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. The shop still smelled like smoke from the fire, her eyes were still failing, and her future was still uncertain, but for one afternoon she had not felt alone in her struggle. That was worth more than she could express. Saturday became the day Katherine looked forward to all week. Ben arrived every week like clockwork, always cheerful despite whatever hardships he was facing on his own claim. He told her about his life while they worked, how he was trying to prove up his homestead so he could own the land outright. He talked about the harsh winters, the isolation, the gamble that every homesteader made when they filed a claim. Katherine, in turn, found herself opening up about her own past, about losing her parents and coming west with nothing, about building her business from the ground up and what it meant to her. "You should be proud of what you have accomplished," Ben said one Saturday in late October. They were making bayberry candles, the expensive kind that Katherine only produced in small batches because the materials were costly. "You created something real here, Katherine. That takes courage." "It will not matter if I have to close," Katherine said, her hands moving over the molds to check their contents. "All that courage will not amount to much if I end up begging on the streets." "That will not happen," Ben said firmly. "We will figure something out." Katherine wanted to ask him what "we" meant in his mind, wanted to know if he felt the same pull between them that she felt, the same awareness that seemed to charge the air whenever they stood close together. But she was afraid of the answer, afraid that he was just being kind and she was reading too much into it. So she kept her questions to herself and focused on the work. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping across the Dakota plains with bitter winds and temperatures that dropped so low the water in Katherine's pitcher froze solid overnight. The shop was hard to keep warm, and Katherine's fingers grew stiff and clumsy as she tried to work in the cold. Ben showed up one Saturday with an extra stove, a small cast iron thing he had somehow hauled into town on his wagon. "Found it at an auction," he explained as he set it up in the corner of the shop. "Figured you could use more heat in here." "Ben, that is too much," Katherine protested. "You must have paid good money for it." "It was nothing," Ben said, brushing off her concern. "Besides, I am being selfish. I need to keep my hands warm if I am going to be any use to you." The stove made an enormous difference, and Katherine found herself standing near it between tasks, letting the warmth seep into her bones. Ben had started staying longer on Saturdays, often until after dark, and they had fallen into the habit of sharing a simple supper together after the work was done. Katherine would make soup or stew, and Ben would contribute bread or vegetables, and they would sit at her small table and talk about everything and nothing. "Tell me what you see when you look at me," Katherine asked him one evening in early December. The question had been building in her for weeks, a need to know how he perceived her now that her eyes had grown even worse. "I know you can see the way I squint and miss things. Do you think I look helpless?" Ben set down his spoon and looked at her steadily. Katherine could make out the basic shape of his face but none of the details, and she desperately wished she could see his expression clearly. "I see a woman who gets up every morning and fights," Ben said slowly. "I see someone who refuses to give up even when she has every reason to. I see strength and stubbornness and a streak of pride that is probably not always healthy but that I admire anyway. And I see someone who is beautiful, inside and out, though I know that is probably not what you are asking." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. "You think I am beautiful?" "I do," Ben said simply. "Does that surprise you?" "Yes," Katherine admitted. "I cannot even look someone in the eye anymore, Ben. I walk around covered in wax stains with soot on my face. I am going blind and have no prospects and nothing to offer anyone." "That is about the most foolish thing I have ever heard you say," Ben said, and there was heat in his voice now. "Katherine, you have more to offer than most people I have ever met. You are smart and capable and kind. You built a business with your own 2 hands. The fact that your eyes are failing does not change any of that." "It changes everything," Katherine whispered. "Not to me," Ben said. "Not to anyone who matters. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the stove. Katherine felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to step off into unknown territory. "Why do you keep coming here, Ben?" she asked. "Really, it cannot just be about helping with the candles." "No," Ben agreed. "It is not just about the candles." "Then what is it about?" Ben reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with surprising gentleness. "It is about you, Katherine. I come here because I want to see you, talk to you, be near you. I come here because somewhere between that first day I bought candles and now I fell in love with you." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You love me." "I do," Ben said. "And before you tell me all the reasons why that is a terrible idea, just let me say this. I know your life is complicated right now. I know you are facing challenges that would break most people, but I want to be there for those challenges. I want to be your light when the darkness gets too heavy. If you will let me." Tears were streaming down Katherine's face now, and she did not try to stop them. "I am scared, Ben. I am so scared of what is going to happen to me." "I know," Ben said, standing up and coming around the table to kneel beside her chair. "But you do not have to be scared alone anymore. Let me carry some of that fear with you. Let me help shoulder the burden." "I do not know how to do that," Katherine said. "I have been on my own for so long." "Then we will figure it out together," Ben said. "One day at a time, one step at a time. We will find a way to make this work, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." Katherine reached out with her free hand and touched his face, her fingers tracing the contours she could not see clearly. She felt the rough stubble on his jaw, the strong line of his cheekbone, the warmth of his skin. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I love you." Ben turned his head and kissed her palm, then stood and gently pulled her to her feet. He wrapped his arms around her, and Katherine leaned into his embrace, feeling safer than she had in months. When he kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Katherine let herself believe, just for a moment, that everything might actually be all right. They stood there in the warmth of her small room, holding each other as the winter wind howled outside, and Katherine felt something shift inside her. She had been so focused on what she was losing that she had not allowed herself to see what she might be gaining. Ben was offering her partnership, support, love, all the things she had convinced herself she did not deserve because of her failing eyes. "What happens now?" Katherine asked, her face pressed against Ben's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Now we make a plan," Ben said. "We figure out how to keep this business running and how to adapt to your changing vision. We tell people that we are courting so they stop gossiping behind your back. And we start building a future together, whatever that looks like. People will talk either way," Katherine said. "They will say I trapped you or that you took pity on me." "Let them talk," Ben said. "I have never cared much about gossip, and I do not plan to start now. All that matters is what we know to be true." Over the following weeks, Ben and Katherine became a fixture in Fargo, the Candlemaker and the Cowboy who was courting her. Some people were kind and supportive, offering their congratulations and well wishes. Others were less charitable, whispering that it was a strange match or that Ben must have ulterior motives. Katherine tried not to let the gossip bother her, but it was hard not to hear the whispers, especially when her other senses were becoming more acute as her vision faded. Ben proposed on Christmas Eve in the shop, surrounded by hundreds of candles they had made together. He did not have a fancy ring, just a simple gold band he had bought from the jeweler in town, but Katherine did not care about fancy. She cared that he was there, solid and real and steady, offering her a future when she had been sure she had none. "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in January of 1879 in a small ceremony at the church, with Margaret standing up for Katherine and another homesteader standing up for Ben. It was not elaborate, but it was real, and when Ben kissed her at the end of the ceremony, Katherine felt like the luckiest woman in Dakota Territory. The marriage changed things in practical ways that Katherine had not fully anticipated. Ben moved his things into the room above the shop, and suddenly she was not alone anymore. He was there when she woke up in the morning, there when she went to bed at night, there to catch her when she stumbled, and to describe things she could no longer see clearly. It was an adjustment, learning to share her space and her life after so many years of independence, but it was also a relief beyond measure. Together, they transformed the candle business, making changes that accommodated Katherine's vision loss while maintaining the quality that had built her reputation. Ben took over all the tasks that required clear sight, the pouring and finishing and quality control, while Katherine focused on the aspects she could still manage by touch and smell, the mixing of waxes and the selection of materials. They hired a young woman named Emma to help with sales and customer service, which freed them both to focus on production. The business did not just survive, it thrived. Word spread that Katherine and Ben made the finest candles in Dakota Territory, and orders started coming in from as far away as Bismarck and Grand Forks. They expanded the shop, taking over the empty storefront next door and installing more equipment. Ben proved to have a good head for business, tracking orders and managing supplies with the same steady competence he brought to everything. But it was not all about work. Ben made sure they took time for other things too, simple pleasures that Katherine had almost forgotten existed. He would read to her in the evenings, newspapers and novels and letters from friends. He would take her walking along the Red River when the weather allowed, describing the landscape in such vivid detail that she could almost see it. He taught her to rely on her other senses, to navigate by sound and touch and memory. "Tell me about the sky tonight," Katherine would ask, and Ben would describe the sunset or the stars or the storm clouds rolling in from the west. His words became her eyes, painting pictures that were sometimes more beautiful than what she had seen when her vision was clear. By the time spring arrived, Katherine was almost completely blind. She could perceive light and shadow, vague shapes and movement, but nothing more specific than that. It should have been devastating, the final loss of something she had been grieving for more than a year, but somehow it was not as terrible as she had feared. She had Ben, and she had the business, and she had a purpose. The darkness was not empty because he filled it with his presence, his voice, his love. "You are my light," she told him one evening as they sat together watching the sun go down, or rather, as he watched and described it to her. "You know that. When everything else is dark, you are what guides me. And you are my home," Ben replied, pulling her close. "You are the reason I wake up in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. I did not know I was lonely until I met you, and I did not know what love really meant until you said yes to spending your life with me." That summer, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly at first, missed courses and morning nausea that she attributed to bad food, but eventually there was no denying it. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, worried about how she would manage motherhood without sight, but excited about the new life growing inside her. Ben was overjoyed when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around the shop despite her protests. "We are having a baby," he kept saying like he could not quite believe it. "Katherine, we are going to be parents." "I am scared," Katherine admitted. "How am I going to take care of a child when I cannot see?" "The same way you run a business and manage a household," Ben said. With help, with adaptation, and with more strength than you give yourself credit for. We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else. The pregnancy was difficult, and Katherine spent much of it exhausted and sick, but Ben was patient and supportive through all of it. He took over even more of the shop work, insisting that she rest and take care of herself. Emma proved invaluable, helping with tasks that required sight and keeping the business running smoothly. Their son was born in March of 1880, a healthy baby boy they named William after Ben's father. Katherine held him for the first time and wept, wishing desperately that she could see his face clearly. But Ben described every detail to her until she could picture him perfectly in her mind. He had dark hair like Ben and Katherine's nose, and tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around hers with surprising strength. Motherhood was every bit as challenging as Katherine had feared, but also more rewarding than she had imagined possible. She learned to care for William by touch and sound, to recognize his different cries and to navigate his needs without sight. Ben was an active father, sharing all the duties and never making Katherine feel inadequate because of her blindness. "You are an amazing mother," he would tell her when she expressed doubts. "William is lucky to have you." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their son. William learned to walk and talk, and Katherine memorized the sound of his footsteps, the cadence of his voice, the feel of his hand in hers. Ben described what the boy looked like as he grew, how he had Katherine's smile and Ben's eyes, how he was curious and energetic and smart. The candle business continued to flourish, and they eventually trained Emma so well that she could run much of the operation herself. This gave Ben and Katherine more time to focus on their family and their life together. They bought the building that housed the shop, securing their future in Fargo. They made friends, became part of the community, built something lasting. When William was 3, Katherine became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born in the autumn of 1883, a tiny thing they named Rose. She was different from William, quieter and more contemplative, and Katherine loved her with the same fierce intensity she loved her son. "Our family is complete," Ben said, holding Rose while William climbed onto his lap, demanding a story. "This is everything I never knew I needed." Katherine sat beside them, her hand on Ben's shoulder, listening to the voices of her husband and children, and felt a contentment so profound it took her breath away. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned. She had lost her sight, lost the independence she had valued so highly, faced fears she had never wanted to face. But she had gained so much more than she had lost. She had love, partnership, family, purpose. "Tell me what you see," Katherine said to Ben, like she had so many times over the years. "I see our children, healthy and happy," Ben said softly. "I see the home we have built together, the business that keeps us fed and secure. I see a future full of possibility and promise. And I see you, my love, the woman who changed my life in every way that matters." "That is what I see too," Katherine said. "Maybe not with my eyes, but with everything else that matters. I see us, and it is beautiful." As the years continued to unfold, the Turner family became a cornerstone of Fargo's growing community. The candle shop remained successful, adapting to changing times and new competition, but never losing the reputation for quality that Katherine had established. Ben and Katherine worked side by side, their partnership as strong in business as it was in life. William grew into a thoughtful boy who loved to help in the shop, learning the craft of candle making from both his parents. He became his mother's eyes in many ways, describing things to her and helping her navigate new situations. Rose was quieter but no less loving, often sitting beside Katherine and telling her elaborate stories about imaginary worlds, her voice painting pictures that her mother could see in her mind. The community of Fargo evolved around them too. The frontier town grew into a proper city, with more businesses and more people arriving every year seeking opportunities in the northern plains. Katherine and Ben watched this transformation through the lens of their shop, meeting newcomers and helping them settle in, becoming the kind of established citizens who gave advice and lent a hand to those who needed it. Margaret remained a close friend through all of it, often stopping by for tea and conversation. "I never doubted you would find a way to make it work," she told Katherine one afternoon when they were alone. "But I have to admit, I am so glad Ben came into your life. You two are perfect for each other." "I am grateful every day," Katherine replied. "I cannot imagine what my life would be without him." "He feels the same way about you," Margaret assured her. "Anyone can see that. The way he looks at you, even after all these years, like you are the most precious thing in his world." Katherine smiled, her hand moving to the locket Ben had given her on their 5th anniversary. Inside were tiny photographs of their children, which she could not see but which she treasured anyway. "He is my light," she said simply, "in every way that matters." As William approached his 10th birthday and Rose turned 7, Ben began teaching his son more about homesteading and ranching. He had never given up his claim north of Fargo, though he no longer lived there full time. Instead, he had hired hands to work the land, and the income from the farm supplemented what they earned from the shop. Now he started taking William with him on his trips to the claim, teaching him about crops and livestock and the hard work of wresting a living from the prairie soil. "He is a natural," Ben told Katherine after one such trip. "He understands the land, respects it. I think he might want to be a farmer when he grows up." "Whatever he wants to be, we will support him," Katherine said, "as long as he is happy and true to himself." Rose, meanwhile, showed an aptitude for the candle-making business that surprised them all. She had a keen sense of smell and could identify different waxes and additives by scent alone. Emma started teaching her the basics of the craft, and Rose took to it with enthusiasm and natural skill. "She has your gift," Ben told Katherine. "The same instinct for the work, the same attention to detail." Katherine felt a swell of pride and something else, a sense of continuity and legacy. The business she had built, the craft she loved, would continue through her daughter. Even if her eyes had failed, even if she could not see the work being done, it would carry on. In the spring of 1887, Emma announced that she was getting married and would be moving to Minnesota with her new husband. It was bittersweet news, as Katherine had come to depend on her and consider her a friend, but she was happy for the young woman and wished her well. Finding a replacement was difficult, but eventually they hired a young man named Peter who proved capable and trustworthy. That same year, Ben's health began to worry Katherine. He had always been strong and robust, but now he was 42 and showing the effects of years of hard physical labor. His back bothered him, his joints ached, and he tired more easily than he used to. Katherine urged him to slow down to let others do more of the heavy work, but Ben was stubborn in his own way. "I am fine," he insisted. "Just getting older, same as everyone. You need to take care of yourself," Katherine said firmly. "What good is building a future if you work yourself to death before you can enjoy it?" Ben promised to be more careful, and he did make some changes, delegating more tasks and taking breaks when his body demanded them. But Katherine could tell he was struggling with the loss of physical capability, just as she had struggled with the loss of her sight. It was hard for proud people to accept their limitations. One evening in late summer, as they sat together on the porch of their home above the shop, Katherine brought up something she had been thinking about for months. "Ben, what would you think about selling the homestead claim?" We do not really need the income anymore, and it would give you one less thing to worry about." Ben was quiet for a long time, and Katherine could feel the conflict in him. "That land has been my dream for a long time," he finally said. "Walking away from it feels like giving up." "It is not giving up," Katherine said gently. "It is choosing what matters most. You have the shop, you have us. You have built something real right here. The claim was always about securing a future, and you have done that. Maybe it is time to let someone else chase that particular dream." "When did you get so wise?" Ben asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I had a good teacher," Katherine replied, reaching for his hand. "Someone who taught me that losing one thing does not mean losing everything, that there are many ways to build a life worth living." Ben sold the claim that autumn to a young family just starting out, and Katherine could tell he felt lighter afterward, unburdened by the constant worry and effort the land required. He threw himself more fully into the shop and the family, and his health seemed to improve with the reduced stress. William, now 11, was developing his own dreams and plans. He announced that he wanted to go to agricultural college when he was old enough to learn modern farming techniques and bring them back to Dakota. Ben was delighted and immediately started saving for the tuition. Rose, at 8, was already talking about taking over the candle business someday, and Katherine felt tears prick at her useless eyes at the thought of her legacy continuing. The winter of 1888 was particularly harsh, with blizzards that shut down the town for days at a time. Katherine was grateful for the warmth of their home and the closeness of her family as the wind howled outside. They spent long evenings together, Ben reading aloud while Katherine knitted by touch, and the children did their schoolwork. "Tell me something," William said one night, looking up from his mathematics primer. "Did you ever wish you could see again, Mama? Really see, I mean." Katherine considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I would love to see your faces clearly, to watch you grow and change. But I have learned to see in other ways, and those ways are just as real and just as precious. Your father describes the world to me, and you and your sister tell me about your days, and I can picture everything in my mind. In some ways, I might see more now than I did before." "That does not make sense," William said, but his tone was curious rather than challenging. "It does if you think about it," Ben interjected. "Your mother pays attention to things most people ignore. She hears the changes in your voice that tell her when you are worried or excited. She feels the tension in a room when people are upset. She notices details that sighted people miss because they rely too much on their eyes." "Papa is right," Rose added. "Mama always knows when I am sad, even before I say anything." "That is because I listen to you," Katherine said. "Really listen, with all of my attention. That is what blindness taught me, to be fully present with the people I love." As the children grew older, Katherine and Ben faced the challenges all parents encounter, navigating adolescence and independence and the gradual loosening of bonds. William did eventually go to agricultural college, leaving home at 18 to study in Minnesota. It was hard for Katherine to let him go, but she was proud of his ambition and determination. Rose took over more of the candle business, working alongside Katherine and learning not just the craft but the business aspects as well. She had her mother's skill and her father's head for numbers, and by the time she was 20, she was essentially running the operation with Katherine as an advisor. "You have built something remarkable," Katherine told her daughter one day as they worked together. "I am so proud of you." "I learned from the best," Rose replied. "You and Papa taught me that hard work and perseverance can overcome any obstacle. That is a gift I will carry all my life." Ben and Katherine's love deepened and matured as the years passed. the passionate intensity of their early days mellowing into something quieter but no less profound. They knew each other completely, understood each other's needs and fears and dreams. They had built a life together that honored both of them, that made space for both strength and vulnerability. "You remember the day we met?" Ben asked one evening as they sat together in their familiar spot, his arm around her shoulders. "Every detail," Katherine said. "You were the customer who wanted candles that burned long and steady." "I found something much better than candles that day," Ben said. "I found you. And I found my light," Katherine replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just like you promised all those years ago." When William returned from college with a degree and a wife, a kind woman named Sarah who took to Fargo immediately, Katherine and Ben welcomed them with joy. William used his education to help other farmers in the region, becoming an agricultural consultant and making a real difference in the community. He and Sarah settled nearby and soon provided Katherine and Ben with their first grandchildren, twin boys who filled the house with noise and laughter. Rose married at 23, choosing a quiet merchant named David who respected her independence and supported her work in the candle business. They had 3 daughters over the next several years, and Katherine delighted in being a grandmother, teaching her granddaughters the things she had taught her own children, passing down wisdom and love. As Ben and Katherine moved into their 60s, they gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the business, letting Rose and David take full control while they served as advisors and occasional helpers. It was strange at first, not being needed in the same way, but also freeing. They had time for each other, time for their grandchildren, time to simply be. "We did it," Ben said one evening as they sat on their porch, listening to the sounds of Fargo settling in for the night. "We built a good life, raised good children, created something that will last beyond us." "We did," Katherine agreed. "And we did it together, just like you promised that first day when you said you would help me. You have been my partner in every way that matters." "You saved me too, you know," Ben said. "I was so lonely before I met you, so lost. You gave me purpose and family and love. You made me whole." Katherine reached for his hand, finding it as easily as she always did, her fingers lacing through his. "We saved each other," she said simply. They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to witness the turn of the century and the changes it brought to Fargo and to the world. The candle business evolved with the times, adapting to new technologies and changing demands, but never losing its essential character. Rose ensured that the quality and care that Katherine had instilled remained at the heart of everything they produced. Ben's health declined slowly as he aged, his body finally giving in to the years of hard work and harsh conditions. He faced it with the same quiet courage he had brought to everything, never complaining, always grateful for each day he was given. Katherine nursed him through his final illness with tender devotion, holding his hand and telling him stories, describing the life they had built together. "I would not change anything," Ben whispered one night when he was very weak. "Not a single moment of our time together." "Neither would I," Katherine said, her voice breaking. "You were my light, Ben. You kept your promise. Even when everything was dark, you were there to guide me." "And you were my home," Ben replied. "My heart, my love, my everything." He died peacefully in his sleep a few nights later with Katherine beside him, her hand in his. She felt the moment he left, felt the absence of his presence like a physical loss, and the grief that washed over her was profound and all-consuming. But even in her sorrow, she was grateful. Grateful for every year they had shared, every conversation, every touch, every moment of connection. The family gathered for the funeral, children and grandchildren filling the church and the house, surrounding Katherine with love and support. They told stories about Ben, about his kindness and strength, about the way he had loved Katherine so completely and without reservation. They talked about the legacy he had left, not just in his children, but in the lives he had touched throughout the community. Katherine lived another 8 years after Ben's death, remaining active and engaged despite her advanced age and blindness. She was a fixture in Rose's shop, still offering advice and occasionally helping with the work. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about the old days, about the frontier town that Fargo had once been, about the cowboy who had fallen in love with a candlemaker losing her sight. When Katherine finally passed away in her sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by family and the lingering scent of candles, the whole town mourned her loss. The funeral was packed with people whose lives she had touched, who remembered her strength and grace, who had been inspired by the way she had faced her challenges without self-pity or surrender. Rose took over full ownership of the business, renaming it Turner Family Candles in honor of both her parents. She ensured that the story of Katherine and Ben was preserved, telling it to anyone who would listen, making sure their legacy lived on not just in candles but in memory and love. In the years that followed, the business continued to thrive, passed down through generations of the Turner family. Each new generation learned the craft and heard the story of how it all began, of the candlemaker who was losing her sight and the cowboy who said he would be her light. It became more than just a business success story. It became a testament to the power of love and partnership, to the strength that comes from facing challenges together, to the way two people can save each other and build something beautiful in the process. The candles they made still burned long and steady, just like Ben's first purchase all those years ago, and each flame was a small reminder of the light that Ben and Katherine had brought into each other's lives. The shop itself became a landmark in Fargo, a place that represented not just commerce but history and heart, a tangible connection to the past and the people who had built the community. Visitors to the shop often remarked on the atmosphere, saying there was something special about the place, something warm and welcoming that went beyond the products being sold. The family always smiled at these comments, knowing that what people were feeling was the legacy of love that permeated every corner of the building, the echo of two souls who had found each other against the odds and created something lasting. The story of Katherine and Ben was eventually written down by one of their great-grandchildren, a detailed account of their courtship and marriage, and the life they built together. It was published in the local newspaper as a series, and later compiled into a small book that became popular throughout the region. People were drawn to the romance and the triumph over adversity, to the realness of their struggles and the authenticity of their love. Years turned into decades, and still the candle shop stood on Front Street in Fargo, a testament to persistence and partnership. The building itself was eventually designated as a historical landmark, preserved not just for its age, but for the story it represented. Tours were given, and schoolchildren learned about Katherine and Ben as part of local history lessons, their names becoming synonymous with the pioneer spirit that had built the northern plains. The original workbench that Katherine had used, scarred with years of wax spills and knife marks, was preserved in the shop as a memorial. Visitors could stand beside it and imagine her there, working by touch and memory, refusing to let her blindness define her limitations. Next to it hung a photograph taken late in life of Katherine and Ben, the only clear image that existed of them together. In the picture, Ben's arm was around Katherine's shoulders, and she was smiling up at him with absolute trust and love. Their faces showed the marks of age and hard living, but also joy and contentment, and the deep peace that comes from a life well lived. The brass bell that had hung above the shop door since Katherine first opened for business in 1873 still rang when customers entered, its familiar chime unchanged across more than a century. That sound, clear and bright, became another part of the legend, with people saying it represented the moment Ben first walked into Katherine's life and changed everything. On the anniversary of Katherine and Ben's wedding each January, the Turner family held a special celebration in the shop. They lit hundreds of candles, filling every surface with flickering light, and gathered together to remember the couple who had started it all. They told the stories again, making sure each new generation understood where they came from and what their ancestors had overcome. They raised toasts to love and perseverance, to the power of standing by someone in their darkest moments, to the beauty that can come from unexpected places. The candle-making techniques Katherine had developed and refined over her years of work were still used, passed down through careful teaching and practice. The signature scents and styles that had made her candles famous remained the shop's bestsellers, recipes that had been perfected through trial and error and adaptation to her changing vision. Each candle produced by Turner Family Candles carried a small tag that told the abbreviated version of Katherine and Ben's story, spreading their legacy to customers far beyond Fargo's borders. Local artists created paintings and sculptures inspired by Katherine and Ben's romance, and their story was adapted into a play that toured regional theaters. The themes of their life together, the courage to love despite uncertainty, the willingness to be vulnerable, the commitment to partnership over independence, resonated across generations and circumstances. People saw their own struggles reflected in Katherine's journey and found hope in the way Ben's love had sustained her. The homestead claim that Ben had once worked, the land he eventually sold to focus on his family, was eventually purchased by the state and turned into a heritage farm where visitors could learn about pioneer agriculture. A small museum on the property included exhibits about Ben's time there and his decision to prioritize love over land, a choice that many found moving and instructive. In Fargo itself, a park was named in Katherine and Ben's honor, a quiet green space along the Red River where couples often went to walk and talk. A bronze statue was erected there showing Katherine and Ben in their younger years, his hand guiding hers, her face turned up toward him with an expression of trust and love. The statue became a popular spot for proposals and wedding photos, with people drawn to the symbolism of two people facing life's challenges together. The church where Katherine and Ben were married still stood, though it had been renovated and expanded over the years. The original pews where they had taken their vows were preserved, and weddings held there often included readings about love and partnership drawn from accounts of Katherine and Ben's relationship. The minister who performed their ceremony had written in his diary about the profound connection he witnessed between them, and his words were often quoted in discussions about what marriage should aspire to be. Margaret Walsh, the friend who had urged Katherine to accept help and who had stood beside her at her wedding, had her own place in the story as it was told and retold. She represented the community support that allowed Katherine and Ben to thrive, the network of relationships that sustained them through difficult times. Her mercantile had long since closed, but her descendants still lived in Fargo and took pride in their ancestors' connection to the famous couple. The letters Katherine and Ben wrote to each other during his occasional trips away from Fargo were eventually donated to the Historical Society and carefully preserved. Reading them provided intimate glimpses into their relationship, the playful affection, The deep respect, the unwavering commitment. Ben's descriptions of the world in his letters, written knowing Katherine would need someone to read them to her, were particularly poignant, showing his constant awareness of her needs and his desire to be her eyes even at a distance. Students studying disability history found Katherine's story particularly significant, as it provided a nuanced example of how people adapted to vision loss before modern accommodations and technologies. Her methods for organizing her workspace, her reliance on other senses, her willingness to accept help while maintaining agency, all offered insights that remained relevant. The fact that she not only survived but thrived, that she found love and built a business and raised a family, challenged assumptions about what blindness meant for a person's potential. The Turner family took their role as keepers of Katherine and Ben's legacy seriously, understanding that they were custodians of something larger than just a business or a family history. They used their platform to support causes Katherine and Ben would have cared about, donating candles to churches and charities, supporting programs for people with vision loss, contributing to historical preservation efforts. Every decision was filtered through the question of whether it honored the values their ancestors had lived by. As the 21st century dawned, Turner family candles faced new challenges from mass production and online retail, but the family adapted just as Katherine had adapted to her blindness, and Ben had adapted to help her. They developed an online presence while maintaining the personal touch that had always defined their business. They offered tours and workshops, teaching candlemaking to a new generation and telling Katherine and Ben's story to anyone who would listen. They understood that what they were really selling was not just candles but connection to history, to romance, to the enduring power of love and commitment. The little room above the shop where Katherine and Ben had lived and raised their children remained largely unchanged, preserved as part of the historical tour. Visitors could see the table where they had shared meals, the rocking chair where Katherine had nursed her babies, the bed where they had slept side by side for decades. The simplicity of it struck people, the reminder that profound love did not require wealth or luxury, just presence and devotion and the willingness to show up for each other day after day. On quiet evenings, when the shop was closed and the streets of Fargo were settling into darkness, family members sometimes reported feeling a presence in the old building, nothing frightening or unsettling, just a sense of warmth and peace, of being surrounded by love. Whether it was truly the spirits of Katherine and Ben, or simply the accumulated emotion of more than a century of stories told and memories cherished, it contributed to the sense that they were still there somehow, still watching over the legacy they had built. The last direct descendant who had known Katherine personally, a great-granddaughter who had been a young child when Katherine died, lived to be nearly 100 years old. She gave countless interviews about her memories of the old woman who had told such vivid stories, who had taught her to make candles by feel, who had radiated strength and grace despite her blindness and age. When she herself passed away, the connection to living memory was finally severed, but the story remained, passed down through written records and oral tradition, and the continued existence of the business itself. New generations of the Turner family continued to be born, children who would grow up hearing about their famous ancestors, who would learn the family business and decide whether to carry it forward. The choice to continue was never assumed or demanded, but offered, with the understanding that honoring Katherine and Ben meant living with the same integrity and commitment they had demonstrated, whether that was in candle making or some other pursuit entirely. And through it all, Through every retelling and every generation and every change that time brought to Fargo and the world beyond it, the essential truth of Katherine and Ben's story remained constant. She had been losing her sight, facing a future of darkness and uncertainty, and he had said he would be her light, and he had kept that promise every day for the rest of their lives together. They had loved each other wholly and completely, building a partnership that sustained them through every challenge. They had proven that limitations did not have to define a life, that love could conquer fear, that two people committed to each other could create something beautiful and lasting. The candles still burned, long and steady, just as they always had, each flame a small beacon against the darkness, each one a reminder of the light that love brings into the world, each one a testament to a candlemaker and a cowboy who found each other in a frontier town and built a legacy that would endure for generations to come.